Picture this, a podcast microphone, two former NFL brothers sitting across from a man who has never been afraid to say what everyone else is thinking. Charles Barkley leans forward. The room goes quiet, and then he says something that will ignite a firestorm across the basketball world within hours. He's talking about Steph Curry, the greatest shooter who has ever lived, the man who rewired an entire sport, who turned the three-point line into a weapon, who made grown men in barbershops argue about whether basketball itself had changed forever because of him. And Charles Barkley, a Hall of Famer, a man who bled through the trenches of 1990s basketball, looks at Curry's legacy and asks one brutal question. Could he have survived back then? Not survived as in struggled. Survived as in physically, bone-crushingly survived. Barkley doesn't hate Curry. He makes that painfully clear. He says it over and over, almost like he's bracing himself for the backlash he knows is coming. He loves Steph, but love doesn't stop him from telling the truth as he sees it. And the truth, according to Barkley, is this. Stephen Curry, for all his brilliance, would have been physically destroyed by the era Barkley grew up in. Think about what basketball looked like before the rules changed. Before the league decided to protect its stars, to open up the lanes, to let shooters live in peace beyond the arc. Back then, defenders could grab you. They could hold you. They could hand-check you the entire length of the floor, digging their forearms into your ribs possession after possession. There was no freedom of movement. There was only survival. And Barkley watched Michael Jordan, the most protected superstar of that generation, get hammered every single night. Not just contested. Hammered. Bodies flying into him on drives. Elbows finding his ribs. Grown men built like tanks daring him to fold. Jordan didn't fold. He got up. Again and again, he got up, and that toughness became part of his legend. So Barkley asks the question that cuts right to the bone. If Michael Jordan, 6'6", broad-shouldered, built like a heavyweight, took that kind of punishment every night, what happens to Stephen Curry? A guard listed generously at 6'2", a player whose entire game is built on space, on rhythm, on the freedom to catch and release from 30 feet away without a hand in his face. Barkley's answer is chilling. He says if Curry took the hits Jordan took, he wouldn't just struggle. He'd break in half. That's the phrase that stops you. That's the phrase that turns a casual podcast clip into a full-blown basketball controversy. Because Barkley isn't just questioning Curry's talent. Nobody questions Curry's talent. He's questioning whether Curry's entire body, his entire game, could physically endure an era designed to punish exactly the kind of player Curry is. And here's where the tension deepens. Because Barkley has a point that's almost impossible to argue away. In the 90s, elite shooters existed. Reggie Miller, Dale Ellis, dangerous men from deep, but none of them were launching 10, 11, 12 threes a night. The game didn't allow it. Offenses were built around grinding possessions, pounding the ball inside, surviving the half-court battle. A shooter had to earn every look, fighting through screens that were basically street fights, fighting off. Defenders who had one job, make you feel every single step you took toward that three-point line. Now picture Curry in that world. The step-back threes. The full-speed pull-ups from the logo. The dazzling off-ball sprints around a maze of screens. In today's league, that's an art form. In the 90s, that's a walking invitation for someone to put you on the floor. So the narrative builds. On one side, you have Barkley, a man who lived through war, standing firm on what he witnessed with his own eyes. On the other side, you have an entire generation of fans who watched Curry conquer the modern game, who watched him win championships, break records, and reshape how basketball is played at every level, from playgrounds to the NBA itself. Whose truth wins? Because here's the twist. Curry's greatness was never only about the jumper. Buried underneath the highlight reel threes is a player with elite ball handling, with deceptive strength, with a competitive fire that has never once blinked on the biggest stages. In an era with fewer threes attempted, would Curry simply adjust? Would he become a different kind of deadly, hitting 2 or 3 backbreaking threes a game instead of 8 or 9, while carving defenses apart with drives, floaters, and reads that defenders never saw coming? It's possible. Legends often find a way to bend eras to their will instead of the other way around. Curry has spent his entire career proving doubters wrong, turning size disadvantages into afterthoughts, turning physical mismatches into footnotes beneath his championship banners. But then the tension snaps back the other way, because grit and skill only carry a player so far against pure, repeated physical punishment. Barkley isn't talking about skill. He's talking about survival. About what happens to a lightly built guard when he's hit night after night, year after year, by players whose entire purpose was to make finesse basketball extinct. And that's what makes this debate so magnetic. It's not really about who's better. It's about two different worlds colliding. A modern game built on space, freedom, and record-breaking three-point volume versus an old-school war zone where toughness was currency and every basket was earned in blood. Barkley isn't trying to erase Curry's legacy. He says it himself again and again, almost like a warning label. He loves Steph Curry. He respects what Curry built. But respect and reality, in Barkley's mind, are two very different things. And reality, to him, says the 90s would have chewed up Curry's game and spit it back out unrecognizable. Yet greatness has a way of refusing to be predicted. Every era believes its warriors are the toughest, its battles the fiercest, its survivors the truest measure of greatness. And every generation eventually gets challenged by the next one, forced to ask whether their giants could have handled a different kind of fire. So where does that leave us? With a debate that may never be settled. With a 6'6" enforcer from a different century staring down the legacy of the greatest shooter the game has ever produced. With fans forced to imagine an alternate universe where Curry's threes are met not with open space, but with forearms, elbows, and a game with absolutely no mercy. Would Steph Curry have broken under that pressure? Or would he have found a way to bend the era, just like he bent every doubt thrown at him in his own? One thing is certain. Charles Barkley just lit a fuse that the basketball world won't stop talking about anytime soon.